Many people in America still believe a higher power is at the center of creation and the reason for the origin of everything. Therefore, I thought it would be interesting to take a slight derive into some of these beliefs before returning back to the theory of evolution. The majority of these beliefs in the United States are based on the Genesis creation story found in the Bible, particularly the 7-day creation story in chapter 1 of Genesis. It is interesting to note that outside the Genesis story, there are other ancient texts that interpret the Genesis story from rabbinical scholars throughout the centuries. These texts, such as the Talmud or the Book of the Zohar, which is also known as the Book of Splendor, have formed the basis of what is called Jewish mysticism. You may know it as a Kabbalah. And in these teachings or these interpretations of Genesis chapter 1, it provides a description of creation that I find particularly interesting in terms of the Big Bang. And let me explain. Some of these ancient rabbinical scholars describe God before the creation of everything in the concept of Ein Sof. And Ein Sof basically translates into know nothing or everything or the infinite potential that is conscious, self aware, self actualizing. And this Ein Sof was essentially nothing. And from this nothing became everything. And they continue to describe how Ein Sof, wanting to share with another, creates the Adam Kadmon. Adam. And the Adam Kadmon is essentially described as a vessel that infinitely receives whatever Ein Sof is sharing. And Ein Sof, being this light from light, basically engulfs the Adam Kadmon. It then proceeds to describe how the Adam Kadmon becomes untimely aware of its own divinity. And because of that, the Ein Sof, the light from light, contracts, leaving the vessel, the Adam Kadmon, in the darkness of the void. But the Adam Kadmon, wanting to return back to the Ein Sof, return back to the light, bursts out and expands in all directions in order to try to reach the Ein Sof. I read this and say to myself, wow, it sounds quite similar to our descriptions of a Big Bang. And I often think about how the Shapiro-Whorf hypothesis says that language helps shapes the perception of our reality. And I have to ask myself the question, did the ancient people have a better understanding about the natural phenomena as describing the diversity of life on Earth and how things originated better than we give them credit for? But they explained it in terms of our spiritual existence because those are the words that they had or available to them. I'm not the only one who has thought about this. There is a nuclear physicist by the name of Dr. Gerald Schroeder who has also thought about this. And he wrote a book called Genesis and the Big Bang. And in his book, he mathematically demonstrated that if you can go to the point of instance, the point right before the Big Bang occurred, or at the point the Big Bang occurred, should I say, the universe right now is only 7 days old. But where we are in the time space continuum, the universe is 13.7 billion years old. And both these times are occurring simultaneously. Ultimately, a criticism could be it's his way of trying to reconcile his belief in Genesis with his scientific background. But it does make for an interesting read and discussion. I thought I would share some other creation stories from other cultures. Let us start with the Purusha Sukta from the Rig Veda. The Purusha is described as all that has ever existed and will ever exist. It is a cosmic being or cosmic self or this divine consciousness that was a universal principle in the beginning. Essentially, it was a form of infinite conscious potential, sounding similar to what the ancient rabbinical scholars describe as the Ein Sof, I think, or I compare it to. And it is from this Purusha that all the other deities come into existence. There's also the Enuma Elish, which is the Babylonian creation myth. It is also known as the Seven Tablets of Creation. In the Enuma Elish, the creation of the universe and earth is described to occur in 7 periods, very similar to the Genesis 7-day creation story. It basically says that in the beginning there was only undifferentiated water swirling in chaos. And out of this swirl, the waters divided into sweet fresh water known as the god Apsu, and a salty bitter water, the goddess Tiamat. And once differentiated, the union of these two entities gave birth to the younger gods. Essentially, there was this infinite potential, this swirling chaos that was conscious, that divided itself to create two entities, and these two entities created everything that is known to exist in the universe and the world today. Over in the New World, there is the Popol Vuh, the Mayan creation story. It is an account of creation of all living beings. In this story, animals were created first, and from the animals followed humans. But the first humans were made of earth and mud, and ultimately, because of that, they were soaked up by water and dissolved. This led to a second creation of humans who were made from wood, but they washed away in a flood. And then the story proceeds to discuss these heroic twins who are ultimately the manifestation or bring about the current creation of humans that exist in the world today. In the Greek world, there's Hesiod's Theogony. And in his Theogony, he begins with chaos. And he describes the chaos as a yawning nothingness. And it is out of this nothingness, this almost conscious nothingness, that everything comes into existence. For example, the earth and the abyss and the night and the darkness, they all come into existence. And then from them, the titans arise. And then the titans give birth to the gods of Olympus. In Egypt, there was the Heliopolis and Memphis creation myths. These two schools of thought in Egypt described the origins of all life on Earth and the creation of the universe. In the city of Heliopolis, the creation was attributed to Atum, who is said to have existed in the waters of Nun as an inert potential being. Autumn was a self engendered god, essentially, the source of all the elements and forces in the world. The Heliopolis myth describes the process by which Autumn evolved from a single potential into a multiplicity of elements. The process began with Autumn appearing on this primordial mound that gave rise to the air god Shu and his sister Tefnut, whose existence represented the emergence of an empty space amid the waters. To explain how Autumn did this, the myth uses the metaphor of masturbation, with the hand he used in this act representing the female principle inherent within him. He is also said to have sneezed and spat to produce Shu and Tefnut. In Memphis, on the other hand, they attribute the creative force to Ptah. Ptah's creative thought and speech were believed to have caused the formation of Autumn and the Ennead. Ptah was also associated with the personified primordial mound. In all these stories, creation stories, you can see some similarities, and the similarities involve a beginning where there's a potential, and this potential is essentially conscious, and the conscious potential from nothing creates everything.